Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. I do have one quick favor before we get to the video that you came here for, and that is very simply this. You see that little red subscribe button below this video? Go ahead, smash that subscribe button. It really does help me. It really does help this channel grow and my audience grow. So go ahead and hit that red subscribe button. And now, here is the video that you came here for. All right, everybody, I am back. Good to be back. And I do want to wrap on one more college football topic before we get to college basketball, and that is this transfer portal stuff. And I know I've said it many times, but transfers are now a topic that we discuss on shows like the Aaron Torres Sports Podcast. I said it on Monday's episode talking about Quinn Ewers, who we'll get to in a second. But the transfer game has changed everything, right? We've always talked about high school recruiting. We've always talked about National Signing Day. But now the transfer portal is so transcendent. It is so important to what programs do. And every single program in America is recruiting out of the transfer portal. Alabama, their best wide receiver, their best playmaker, Jamison Williams, came out of the transfer portal from Ohio State. Arguably one of their 2 or 3 best defensive players, Henry To'oTo'o, came from Tennessee. Oklahoma used the portal. This team used the portal. LSU used the portal for Joe Burrow. And so I bring it up because it is now a major topic. And this coming week is actually a very important week for the transfers for this reason. Next Wednesday is National Signing Day. And because of that, because it is National Signing Day, many of these elite transfers want to go ahead and make decisions here in the next few days so that they can go ahead and get signed next week so that they can then enroll in January to start classes at their new school and get ready for spring practice. Obviously, if you get in early, you get to spring practice, you have a better chance of winning a starting spot, getting ready for the fall. And so over the next week, we are going to see a lot of transfer portal craziness. And so because of it, what I've decided to do is I've decided to take a segment here on the Aaron Torres Sports Podcast dedicated solely to transfers. And what I want to do is I want to give you the names of about 5, 6, 7 marquee transfers that are currently in the portal, what the latest is on their recruitments. Some of the recruitments are a little bit more vague than others. And then what I want to do is get you caught up on a few marquee news and notes elements that have already happened in the transfer portal, which are very important for the coming weeks, again, as we head towards National Signing Day. So let's start with the transfer portal. Let's start with the best players currently available in the transfer portal. And look, you guys know who number 1 is because I talked about him on Monday's show. It's Quinn Ewers, the former Ohio State quarterback. And at this point, look, it's kind of like Mario Cristobal, right? We spent part of Monday's show talking about why we did or did not like Mario Cristobal's move to Miami and how it went down. But then you got to react to the move itself, and it's kind of the same with Quinn Ewers. You cannot like the way he handled things at Ohio State. You cannot like the way he took a bunch of NIL money and bounced. But now he is in the transfer portal, and he is one of the most high-profile players literally to ever transfer. This was a guy that was the number 1 player in the high school class of 2022, reclassifies, and by 24/7 Sports measurement was the number 1 high school player in the class of 2021, even though he didn't play a single down this year. And if you believe the recruiting experts, and if you believe those that are insiders in this space, they believe that Quinn Ewers, the former Ohio State quarterback, is the kind of guy that can go to a program, put a program on his back, and lead them to national relevance. This is the kind of guy where if everything lines up, he could be a Heisman Trophy caliber quarterback. And so, of course, we're going to talk about his recruitment, and of course, we're going to talk about what's going on and what's going to happen next. I already kind of talked about it on Monday. I don't think there's really a ton to update. I have said since literally the minute that he hit the portal, I think it's Texas. I think it's going to be Texas. Steve Sarkisian needs that marquee quarterback. There is an opening. There is availability. There is opportunity. And it was funny because I was on radio on College Station on, I guess it was Thursday morning. And at the time, I was asked about, would you take him if you're Steve Sarkisian? Because this is a guy that's, kind of just doesn't have the best reputation off the field. A little bit arrogant, a little bit cocky, a little bit whatever, a little bit. Here's the bottom line. 1, he's insanely talented, and in Texas, you can't be too picky here. But 2, I think that we are now already at the point where Steve Sarkisian needs some very public wins, okay? Because when it comes to college football is all about momentum, right? And I said this on radio in College Station. I said, Texas A&M went 8-4 this year, but you still kind of feel like the momentum is going in the right direction. They're going to sign a top 3, potentially number 1 overall recruiting class in this current cycle. You feel good about going into next year. Whereas at a place like Florida, Dan Mullen, you feel like it's completely going in the wrong direction, and bringing him back another 6 or 8 months into next year, there were going to be no positive headlines, only negativity, and so that's why you had to pull the cord on Dan Mullen this year. So why do I bring it up? It is because Steve Sarkisian needs some momentum going into next season. I'm not saying he's already on the hot seat. I'm not saying he's going to be fired after next season. But you go into next year without a real quarterback, and he has already said publicly he does not believe that either Hudson Card or Casey Thompson is the definitive long-term answer. Didn't call them by name, but did say that he doesn't know if the long-term answer at quarterback is on this roster. And so I bring it up. You go into year 2 without a quarterback. You go 5-7, 6-6, 7-5 again next year. Then we are talking about year 3. You're going into year 3 on the hot seat. And so I believe that Steve Sarkisian needs any kind of positive momentum. I do believe Quinn Ewers will be a Texas Longhorn, but it remains to be seen. It will be very fascinating to see what ends up happening with Quinn Ewers. Obviously, the other buzz is Texas Tech. He has basically privately, publicly eliminated Texas A&M. I never believed they were interested. As I said on Monday's show, I know for a fact they're happy with Haynes King. I know for a fact that they're happy with the quarterback that they have signed in the class of 2022, a kid named Connor Wegman. And so I bring it up because Texas Tech is the other school that feels like there's a little bit of momentum. Obviously, new head coach Joey McGuire, former Baylor linebackers coach. There's talk about hiring Quinn Ewers, high school coach, as an assistant at Texas Tech. I'm sorry, I just don't see it. Even if whether they hire the assistant coach or not, I just don't see Quinn Ewers going to Texas Tech. This kid is so high profile. He has a chance to make so much money off the field at the college level, and he has a chance to do something that no one has done in 15 years, and that is lead Texas back into national relevance as they get set to eventually head into the SEC. I would be stunned if it is anyone other than Texas that gets Quinn Ewers. Really quickly, let's rip through some of the other big names. The number 2 guy I believe in the portal as of right now is a cornerback, so corner, not quarter, cornerback, named Elirix, who played last season at LSU. Fascinating talent and kind of a fascinating story. Originally from California, went to IMG Academy, balled out at LSU, had a season-ending injury, and basically even last offseason, there was talk that he might transfer, and then after Coach O was fired, he officially decided to hit the portal. He was pursued by, and he is being pursued by, literally every marquee program in college football, although this week the perceived favorite was Ohio State, and Ohio State basically pulled out of his recruitment, many believe because they were afraid that if they took him, that some of their high school commits would not sign with the program. So the leader in the clubhouse for Elirix is out the door. And now it opens up the question of who is potentially next. And it appears as though this could be the first of many matchups between Lincoln Riley at USC and Nick Saban at Alabama. Alabama is very much in the mix for his recruitment, but this past weekend he visited USC, where he actually took a few pictures with his former teammate in high school, Damani Jackson, who was the number 1 cornerback in high school football. So you have the number 1 cornerback in the portal visiting USC at the same time as the number 1 corner in high school football, and you start to wonder if those two might end up at USC together, kind of the backbone of what could be the beginnings of a rebuild under Lincoln Riley. Elirix, by the way, it is worth mentioning, he is a kid that has 1 year left of eligibility, which means that he would again potentially have 1 season at USC and could go pro. Many believe he'll be a first-round pick as long as he can stay healthy. Really quick, rip through some of the other big names. Dillon Gabriel, the quarterback from Central Florida. Listen, when he was playing under Josh Heupel, one of the most prolific passers in college football, 7,000 yards passed for between 2019 and 2020. Remember, 2020 wasn't even a full season, had some games canceled because of COVID. On top of that, 32 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. A season ago, Josh Heupel leaves. He plays a couple games under Gus Malzahn, gets hurt. But even at that point, you kind of saw he's kind of more of a drop back, deep ball thrower than he is kind of a true dual threat guy. And so you kind of wondered if it was going to work under Gus Malzahn. He hits the portal. What'll be interesting is he actually visited Ole Miss over the course of last weekend. And I'll tell you this, Lane Kiffin staying at Ole Miss, I believe, is huge for this reason. In the transfer portal era, I believe if he doesn't want to recruit high school quarterbacks anymore, he doesn't have to. He just doesn't have to, because every single quarterback that knows I got 1 year left in college football to make it work, let me go make it work under that guy. I got to get to the league. And so whether it is Dillon Gabriel, whether it is Spencer Rattler, who we'll talk about in a minute, whether it is somebody that isn't yet in the portal, I think Lane Kiffin is going to have his pick of the litter in terms of elite college quarterbacks. But Dillon Gabriel did visit Ole Miss this past weekend. Will be interesting to see what he does from there. Number 4, Zach Evans, former running back at TCU, committed to Georgia out of high school, ends up at TCU, averaged over 7 yards per carry in 2 seasons at TCU, 5-star guy. He's a baller. He actually visited Ole Miss last weekend as well. He is visiting Tennessee as well this coming weekend, so he will probably stay in the SEC. Couple other names worth noting. Listen, I'm not going to try to say too much on this guy, but there is a guy named Olusegun Oluwatimi from Virginia, who was a finalist for the Remington Award, which goes to the nation's top center. He entered the portal after Bronco Mendenhall left. I mean, you just don't get that kind of player in the portal very often. He will be very much in demand. Theo Wees, one of Oklahoma's top wide receivers last season. He was hurt for most of this year. He's in the portal. It's been pretty quiet from there. And then I think on top of that, the really big name to obviously monitor is Spencer Rattler, former number 1 overall quarterback in the class of 2019. Led Oklahoma to a Big 12 title last year, and I talked about him when he entered the portal. I thought Arizona State might be a potential landing spot, but their starter, Jaden Daniels, has decided to come back. What does that mean for Spencer Rattler? I'll say this. My kind of reading of the tea leaves on Spencer Rattler is that the market for Spencer Rattler isn't as great as we believed it to be in the offseason. I don't believe Oregon before Mario Cristobal left was really an option. That was reported. I've seen some UCLA if Chip Kelly stays stuff. I don't believe that is a real option. And so you start to look around. It's hard to find an easy landing spot for him. There's been some speculation that maybe Nebraska could get in the mix as Adrian Martinez has left. There's a possibility that maybe, just maybe, who else? That on top of Nebraska, maybe Missouri, who's going to need a quarterback, maybe South Carolina. Shane Beamer, of course, was an Oklahoma assistant before getting the South Carolina head coach. So we'll see. But what I will tell you is I find it very interesting. I think the market for Spencer Rattler is not as big as we had anticipated. Couple other names, Terrence Lewis, former top linebacker in the class of 2021. He left Maryland. It's been a quiet recruitment so far. Miles Brennan. Okay, so Miles Brennan's kind of an interesting story. He was the guy who was supposed to be the heir apparent to Joe Burrow at LSU, plays 2 games, 3 games last season, plays really well. 3 games, 11 touchdowns, over 1,100 yards passing in 3 games, then gets hurt this offseason, and so he hasn't played a year and a half, and the question becomes, can he stay healthy? But if he's healthy, I think he's one of the best quarterbacks in this portal. He is available, and I'll give a shout-out to one other small school guy. There's a kid named Miles Frazier, who was an offensive tackle at Florida International. Butch Davis leaves. Butch Davis retires, whether he retired intentionally or not, whatever. But this kid, Miles Frazier, an offensive tackle from Florida International, hits the portal, and his phone is blowing up. Has offers from Texas A&M, Florida State, Auburn, Ole Miss, Mississippi State, so he will be a guy to watch. In terms of guys who have already committed, I think there's a couple stories worth monitoring. One, Jaden Hazelwood. He was the number 1 wide receiver in the class of 2019, spent the last 3 years at Oklahoma, decided to leave when Lincoln Riley left, hit the portal, was Oklahoma's leading receiver with 39 catches this year. He's already committed. He's going to Arkansas. That is a big one because Arkansas is going to be looking for a replacement for Traylon Burks, who just declared for the NFL draft. They may have found it in Jaden Hazelwood, Oklahoma's leading receiver this year with 39 catches. Jake Haener, one of the most prolific quarterbacks in college football this year. Really interesting story. He began his career at Washington, goes to Fresno State this year, 40 touchdowns at Fresno State, and then Fresno State's head coach leaves for, you guessed it, Washington. And so the question was he going to follow his head coach from Fresno State back to Washington where he began his career? He actually pulled his name out of the transfer portal this week, and he will be staying at Fresno State. That's big. And then Michigan State, I think this is worth noting. 3 really good pickups already in the portal. 2 linebackers, Jacoby Windman, who was top 15 nationally in tackles this year. Another linebacker by the name of, I'm blanking on the name, Aaron Brule. Great name, by the way. From Mississippi State has committed to them. Also, Jalen Berger has committed to Michigan State. So Michigan State already with 3 marquee transfers. But again, this is stuff to keep an eye on. I wouldn't be surprised if we know where Quinn Ewers is going by the end of this weekend as he gets set to visit Texas. I wouldn't be surprised if we knew where Spencer Rattler is going by the end of this weekend. These kids are going to have to make decisions. They are going to have to make them quick, and it remains to be seen if they're going to go ahead and commit to where we think they will. All right, I do want to take a quick break. I want to come right back, and we will wrap with a little college hoops as my boy Mike Woodson, just devastating loss. We'll also talk a little bit about the rest of the week that was in college basketball, and we'll preview what should be a really fun weekend ahead where there's a lot of marquee games, a lot of fun games. It's just going to be a great weekend in college hoops. I'll preview what you need to watch, all that good stuff. I will be right back.